Dad, my sitting here today in the U.S. Capitol talking to our elected officials is proof that you made the right decision 40 years ago to leave the Soviet Union and come here to the United States of America in search of a better life for our family. Do not worry, I'll be fine for telling the truth.
And why do you have confidence that you can do that and tell your dad not to worry?
Congressman, because this is America. This is the country I've served and defended, that all of my brothers have served, and here, right matters.
Thank you, sir. Yield back.
November 19th, 2019, the day most of the country learned the name Alexander Vindman. The now retired lieutenant colonel was the one who sounded the alarm about what he heard on then President Trump's July 25th, 2019 phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, which eventually led to President Trump's first impeachment trial. And retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Vindman joins us now. He is the author of the new book out today called Here, Right Matters, An American Story. Colonel Vindman, good morning. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Billy.
I want to talk about that testimony. I want to talk about what you heard on the phone call. But we were just discussing what you said in that testimony, which is your immigrant story, that your family came here. I think you were 3 years old, came to Brooklyn. In that testimony, you touched on something that was so important, which is that you could speak out in this country, something that your father felt you couldn't do because of his own experience in the Soviet Union.
Well, I think the immigrant story is so important to so many Americans. Very few can claim that they're native. And that's something, a common thread that ties us all together. I thought that was critical to address this, especially in this moment where immigrants are being attacked. And then it also affected me deeply because I had some experience with what the other side looked like, where right doesn't matter. In the United States, it does. We need to continue to make it matter, and I think that's part of the reason I wrote this book.
Seeing some pictures of you and your twin brother also worked the National Security Council. He figures into the story of July of 2019 as well. There's a scene in the book while this is all going on and you're preparing to testify, where your father, again based on his experience in the Soviet Union, tells you straight up, support the president. Go out there and support President Trump.
Right.
How did you take that, and what did you say back to him?
Well, I respect my dad. He always he has awesome advice, prescient advice oftentimes, but in this case, I knew exactly what the right thing to do was. And I knew that he was in part channeling his experiences and a deep fear that I would potentially end up like so many in the Soviet Union or in other authoritarian regimes end up, which is persecuted, prosecuted, and maybe even killed. And that's what he was channeling when he provided his advice.
Well, ironically, there was a grain of wisdom to what he was saying, because eventually you did leave the United States Army based on your decision to testify. So let's go back to the call. Thursday, 9 o'clock in the morning, July 25th, 2019, President Trump calls President Zelensky, ostensibly to congratulate him on his election. What did you hear specifically on that call that raised the alarms for you?
Well, even going into the calls, I was apprehensive. I shouldn't have been. I put together all the talking points. I knew exactly how it should have gone. And under almost any other circumstances, except for that president, because he never really followed anything scripted or policy oriented. It was almost always self-serving. But I knew that there was a risk that it would go the way we had seen it going, with the Giuliani narrative creeping in, with this demand for an investigation. There was a preceding meeting on July 10th where I also expressed my concerns to senior White House officials. And I was apprehensive because I thought that there's a chance that the president was going to go down this line. But on the other side, there was a professional military officer that refused to believe that the president was going to be complicit in this corrupt enterprise, undermining the very foundation of our election, which is a free and fair election. And that's how I walked into the call. And as soon as the president joined the line, I could tell it was going to go badly.
President Trump infamously called it a perfect phone call. What was the statement? What were the words you heard that told you, I need to go tell somebody about this?
Sure. I mean, they culminated in the most famous words. I need you to do us a favor, though. Apply a little bit of drama to it and a little bit of a kind of mafioso Italian accent. It comes crystal clear. But throughout the phone call, you could hear the president building towards something. He was talking about everything that the United States has done. Nobody's done more. The Ukraine, is not appreciative. And then in response to President Zelensky's suggestion that they were going to buy more weapons, that they needed critically needed to defend against more Russian aggression, the president responds, I need you to do us a favor, though. And then there was all sorts of other crazy stuff about CrowdStrike servers and Burisma and all these things. And, I knew right away that I had to do something to get us back on track. The president flip-flopped on many issues, and with the right people counseling him, if things had gone properly, he could have been brought back onto target.
So you walk into your twin brother's office.
Mm-hmm.
There's part of that immigrant story, making it all the way to the White House. Twin brother's office afterward. He also worked for the National Security Council. And you say, this is what I just heard. Now, by even having that conversation or entertaining the idea that we're going to push this up the chain of command, you're probably stepping into something because of who this president is and who he surrounds himself with. What was that conversation like with your brother?
So it was the amazing thing about this whole thing is I had the closest ally I could in the White House with me, my identical twin brother. We were roommates. So I speak to him on a regular basis, multiple times a day. That was pretty much the only break I took. So as soon as I walked in there, he could probably sense that there was something off. I closed the door. There was a little dramatic pause, and I tell him, Eugene, if what I'm about to tell you ever becomes public, the president will be impeached. Wow. And there was a disconnect from the reality that somehow this would become public, because normally it doesn't. This is government, everything's classified, but it did, and history unfolded with the president being impeached.
So again, because this is Donald Trump and because he surrounds himself with people like Rudy Giuliani, when you go out that you're going to be smeared, they're going to try to discredit you, they might even strip you of all the things. They obviously denied your promotion to colonel. What was the calculus in your mind in that moment of, should I do this? Should I open up Pandora's box?
So there was no hesitation on the fact that I needed to report this. It was my duty. I had sworn an oath on multiple occasions to support and defend the Constitution against enemies foreign and domestic, and there was no hesitation. I recognized I'd almost certainly be out of the White House. In the back of my mind, there was a risk to my career, but I was hopeful. I tend to be optimistic. I think one of the hardest aspects of this whole affair was that the military wasn't supportive. And in your last segment, you talked about the suicide of the police officers. I think, having in some ways similar experiences, the hardest part might be, yes, the attacks on that day, but the subsequent attacks, the demonization, the character assassination from folks that they defend on a regular basis, the folks in Congress, the folks that supposedly support law enforcement. That is a difficult thing to bear, and that's it's hard to not hold a grudge. I try to not have hard feelings against an institution I served and loved for decades, but it's not easy sometimes.
So how did you process that, Colonel Vindman, when the kind of people you've served with for your entire life in the United States Army, people in the United States military, when you went to them assuming that they would take this seriously and push it up through the chain of command themselves, when you met a brick wall and they said, we don't want any part of this, in fact, we're going to push you away, what did that feel like?
So it was pretty, watching it unfold, it's hard to describe. There was no outreach. You typically, in the military, you have your senior leadership is always eager to weigh in, correct you if you're doing something wrong, encourage you if you're doing something right. That's just the way the system works. That's leadership. But there was nothing. It was dead air. I had one conversation with the Chief of Staff of the Army. He said, do the right thing in the right way. I looked at him very puzzled. What is the right way? And I knew what the right thing was, but what does the right way mean in this context? A lieutenant colonel challenging the commander-in-chief based on the president's violation of his obligations to the Constitution. Could you give me a little bit more? And, nothing.
What do you say to people who've heard your story, heard your testimony, will read this book and say, you know what, these are supporters of Donald Trump. Largely what he said was harmless. It was just Donald Trump kind of spouting off being Donald Trump. What do you say to that?
I think that we should not be dismissive. If we want right to matter, we have to make it matter. I think the Congress, the Senate in particular, Senate Republicans abrogated their responsibilities under the Constitution and under the specific oath they swore during the trial. There's a direct logic link to the 600,000 dead. If the president was held accountable, removed, we would have 600,000 more Americans walking the streets today. If they censured him, the president would be on his heels, and he would probably have been a little more cautious going into COVID. We wouldn't have an economic disaster. If we want things to matter, we have to make it matter. And that means each one of us making our voices heard. An individual can make a difference. It's just that simple. If anything, I'm an example of that, whether that was willingly or not. I think we should keep that in mind and try to make things better.